Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time. And I'm coming to you from New York today. Next week, we are going back to our regular schedule. I will send an email. So that means next Tuesday, we're going to meet at our regular time and nobody has to wake up before 6 in the morning. Okay, this week, this is our 10th lesson. And we are going to review Daf 64 through 70. For those of you who are looking, we are almost finished Masechet Yoma. We have another about 2.5 weeks till the end of the Masechet. So I hope that you have been enjoying this Masechet as much as I have. Okay, let's get started. So on Daf 64, we're in the middle of trying to understand what is the status of the goat that is going to go to the wilderness, the Seir LaAzazel. What's interesting, and we mentioned this a little bit last week, and we'll see more this week, it has a pair. We saw that last week. One of them is going to be sacrificed in the temple. The other goes out to the wilderness. And the question is, what does that mean? What is the status of the goat that goes out to the wilderness? Is it a sacrifice, even though we know that sacrifices are not outside of the temple, they're only in the temple, or is it something else? And basically what we're going to see is that it's somewhere in the middle. It's attached, or it's connected. It's connected to or linked to the sacrifice, and therefore it does have properties, we'll see in 1 minute, that seem more sacrifice-like. Okay, so let's see. Daf 64 explains an idea that we have. I'm not sure if we learned it before, but you are not allowed to sacrifice an animal and its mother on the same day. That's called oto ve'et beno, but really it means the mother and the baby animal are not allowed to be sacrificed on the same day. I guess it seems a little cruel, and therefore, and that's for a sacrifice. So here the question is on 64, if they sacrifice the mother of the Seir LaAzazel, the goat that is going to go to the wilderness, can it be used or not? Right? Again, the Gemara on 64 says you cannot use it. But again, the Gemara asks, but hold on, it's not a sacrifice. It's not being sacrificed in the temple. So why does it matter? So the Gemara explains that throwing it off the cliff is like slaughtering it for a sacrifice. And therefore, you cannot sacrifice its mother. And also, it needs to be at least 8 days old. Another criteria for an animal that is going to be a sacrifice. The next idea on 64, it said in the Mishnah that the second goat is sent to graze. If you remember last week, we discussed if we lost, or if one of the animals died, you bring a new pair, and then you use one from the new pair. And then the question is, in theory, we had originally 4 animals. One of them died. Now we have 3 animals. Which one is considered the first and which is the second? It gets a little complicated here on this daf, but it's basically a machloket. As we all know in the Gemara, there are always differences of opinions. One opinion is that the one that's sent, right, again, one is sent to graze and one is sacrificed. And the question is which one, again, from the first pair, the original pair, or from the new pair. And basically, what is the fundamental argument in this argument? What are they disagreeing about? They're disagreeing about the concept of dichui. Dichui means to be pushed aside. And the question is, if something was unusable, you couldn't use it, so then you can't now use it. That's called dichui, when something is pushed aside. The question is this concept, does it apply to a live animal? Again, remember we had 2 goats. One of them died. The other one is still alive. So is that now that animal seen as unfit? And when we bring the new pair, we use the full new pair, meaning the 2. Or do we say, no, this one is still alive, it's part of the original pair, we should use the original one? And again, that is going to be the argument, right? So Rav says you bring from the first pair. Again, we've seen the concept of the first one that you can use. That's the mitzvah. That's the best. Option, and therefore you should use the first one. And then the one of the second pair, that one is sent to graze. He learned it from Shkalim. If you remember, those of you who have learned Shkalim with us, remember we said that you have to use the thing. Remember we said last week, we actually brought it up, that there were the different boxes, collection boxes, and on it said Aleph, Bet, Gimel. And the Gemara taught us, and we actually reviewed it last week as well, you use Aleph first, right? Aleph is the first letter. You use that one first. Then you go to Bet, right, like B, and then you go to C, to Gimel, right? You have to use it in the order that it came in. That's one opinion. The second opinion, of course, is the other one, right? No, we should use the second pair. Again, we're using one of the second pair. So the second opinion is you should use the complete pair. Why? Because they came together, and each one of them has to be alive for the other one to work. So that's the opinion of using from the second one. Again, we see so at the bottom of 64, we said that if the blood spills, then the other pair, right, the goat that's supposed to go to the wilderness, he dies, again, because the live animal is seen as unfit. And this is exactly our machloket, our disagreement that we mentioned at the beginning of this daf, at the beginning of this page. Here, the Gemara at the bottom of 64 says, right, but also even if it's a communal sacrifice, it's also left to die. But if it's a personal sacrifice, maybe it does not die. Maybe there's a differentiation between a communal sacrifice and a personal sacrifice. At the top of 65, the Gemara discusses Tamara. If you remember Tamara, we talk about, here it's talking about if a korban chatat, a sin offering, if it gets lost, remember, and then the owner brought another one. We discussed this a lot in Masechet Psachim, where we talked about animals they're designated, but then they get lost. And then they use another one. So the Mishnah over there says that this one has to be left to die, right? And the second one is really the replacement. But of course, in that Mishnah, it also says that there's a difference of opinion, and maybe not, it doesn't die, right? But everyone agrees that the first one dies if the second one was already brought. Another opinion is that the second one is left to graze. So as we see, sorry if it's getting a little complicated, but the idea is that there are two different opinions whether or not the original animal is brought as a sacrifice, or is it left to graze till it gets a blemish and then it's sold, or does it need to die? So that's basically a summary of our difference of opinion. Again, the Gemara continues discussing this disagreement if it's the first pair or the second pair that's left to die. Okay, so now the question is, why we're just going to question the original assumption. The original assumption is if the blood of the animal that was going to be sacrificed die, if the blood spills and you can't use it, we said that the goat that's going out to the wilderness needs to die or needs to graze. And the question is why, right? It's still alive. Why do we need to get rid of it and bring a new one? So the Gemara says that it needs to be alive for all the blood applications to be done, right? As we mentioned last week, we went through all the different blood applications in the temple. The other goat needs to be standing alive while that is happening in the temple. And interestingly, the Gemara brings up when we learned in Masechet Shkalim about the idea that if you sent your money with a messenger and it gets lost on the way, right? You need to take a vow that you sent it, and then you pay again. And if you found the money, so it can't be used for next year. Remember, we said in Masechet Shkalim, every year is used for that year. It cannot be used for next year. And here we get into the next question, which is, what about the goat or the bull of Yom Kippur? Can you use it from one year to the next? Again, as we mentioned, let's say you had to bring another one, a replacement, or it got lost and then you found it. Can you save this animal for the next year? So Rabbi Huda says you cannot use it for the next year because, again, it was bought with communal funds, remember, with the shkalim, and you can't use it from one year to the next, right? Every year you collect new communal funds, and therefore it needs to die. The Gemara continues on 65 and says how in Nisan, in the month of Nisan, the communal sacrifices are bought from the new funds. Remember, we said Masachet Shkalim, all the shkalim, the machatzita shekel that were collected for the new year, that is going to fund all the communal sacrifices from Nisan for the new year. And therefore, we said that you cannot use animals from the year before. The Gemara says, well, maybe maybe the animals from Yom Kippur are different, and maybe they can be used. The Gemara says, no, they cannot be used. One answer is, as we mentioned, communal funds. The other is it's going to be too old, right? So one of the animals needs to be 1 year old or within its first year. If you wait a year, it will not be right within its first year because it's going to be too old, right? From 1 year to the next. And the Gemara discusses, what does it mean a year old? And this is very interesting, right? We're used to, right? Does it go by 365 days or 12 months, meaning from day to day? As we know, like your birthday is the same day every year, but it's not always 365 days from the last year. Again, especially if we're talking about from the Hebrew date, it is not going to be 365 days. So there's a discussion at the bottom of 65. What does it mean a year? 365 days or from the date? So again, as we see at the top of 66, again, from one Yom Kippur to another is not 365 days. Again, the Hebrew calendar is a lunar calendar, not a solar calendar, and therefore it is less than 365 days. Wait, Lizette, are you speaking? I can't hear you. Okay. You can write in the chat. Can you hear me? Lizette, can you hear me? Okay. I can't hear you. So if you want to unmute, you can speak. And if not, you can type in the chat and let me know what your comment was. Okay. I'm going to continue. So Daf 66. We said that, why can't, so maybe, again, we said maybe the animal from last Yom Kippur is within a year old, so it really could be used. The Gemara says, no, we don't want it to be used because we are concerned maybe there'll be a mishap. Maybe someone is going to use it throughout the year in the wrong time, and therefore, if something is sanctified, we do not keep it around for an entire year. We're going to get rid of it and have a new animal for the next year. So some people say we are concerned for mishaps. Some say that we are not concerned for mishaps. And now we're going to go to the next Mishnah. I'm going to share some pictures with you. Hold on 1 second. Okay, here we go. I will open my chat if someone wants to write something so I can see you. Okay. Yes. Did you want to say something?
I don't know how.
Okay, now we can hear you. Did you want to
Oh,
say something?
yes, it's not just a lunar calendar, it's both, but
Correct.
more lunar than solar. And I
Correct.
can't talk
Excellent.
anymore because it's echoing now.
Okay, so excellent. So you can unmute yourself. You can mute yourself.
I don't know how
Excellent.
yet.
I'll do it. I'll do it for you.
Thank you.
Okay. Uh, no, wait. Okay, here you can mute yourself, but correct. Our the Hebrew calendar is lunar and solar. It's connected to both. But for the days for the day of the year, it is lunar as opposed to solar. Correct. Excellent. Okay, let's go to the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah is going to explain we're going to continue to discuss what happens on Yom Kippur. And here we go. We're on 66. The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, now goes to the Seir LaAzazel, the goat that is going to go out to the wilderness. He leans over him and he says his vidui, the prayer of atonement. And he says, right, the children of Israel have sinned. Please forgive them, as it says in the Torah. And he asks for forgiveness for them. The priests and the nation, when they hear the name of God, they are going to kneel and bow down and say Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, as we mentioned before. And just an interesting aside, I think I mentioned this previously, but on Yom Kippur, when we read the Yom Kippur service and we get to these moments in the prayer, we actually, or there is a tradition or a custom to actually bow down and say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto. So the idea is that we are mirroring what actually happened in the temple courtyard when everybody heard the name of God. And on Yom Kippur, we do that as well. So it's just interesting. I really hope that when Yom Kippur comes around, your prayers will be, I hope, more enriched after our learning. Okay, so then the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, gives it to the person who is going to take it out into the wilderness. And the question here is it a Kohen? Is he a priest? Is he a regular person? The Mishnah continues and tells us that there was a ramp that led him out into the wilderness so that people couldn't pull out his hair. We're going to discuss this in the Gemara. So the Gemara says on 66, wait 1 second. So the Gemara says on 66 that this was an ish iti. He was a designated man. He could have been anybody. He doesn't have to be a priest. He was prepared, meaning he was already ready to go from before Yom Kippur. They knew who it was going to be. Even if it's on Shabbat, even if he's tameh, he does do it, and we do send him out into the wilderness. And basically, what's the issue of Shabbat? That if the goat gets sick and he can't walk, he can actually pick up the goat and take him with him, even if it's on Shabbat, meaning is it considered carrying or not? The Gemara says, well, it's on Yom Kippur, it's not a problem. On Shabbat, it would be a problem to carry, but we say that for this, it's okay. And he can still, even if he becomes tameh, he can still go into the temple courtyard to get the goat. That's how serious this is. And here, Rabbi Elazar is being asked a number of questions here on Daf 66. And it seems that he responds in a very evasive way. And in the end, we find out that it's not because he doesn't know the answer, rather that he wouldn't give a ruling on something that he didn't hear directly from his teacher while his teacher was alive. And here we really see this idea of of sort of honor that one gives his teacher. And this is what Rabbi Elazar does. So we're going to go through a number of questions that he's asked. One is, again, can he carry the goat if it gets sick? And right, can he get someone else to take the goat, right? If he was designated, can he now designate somebody else? What if he pushes off the goat, and what if it doesn't die? Right? Does he right? He needs to actually go down the cliff and kill it. Right? Does he get olam haba? Does he get the afterlife? And the Gemara says, right? Can a shepherd? Right? His answer is, can a shepherd save sheep from lion? Right? Can right? Again, a whole bunch of questions are being asked, and again, as I mentioned, the answers are quite evasive. The question here says that there are 3 different deaths to those who did chet ha'egel. Since we're talking about a goat, so we go on to the sin of the golden calf. And the Gemara talks about those who actually sacrificed to the golden calf. Again, this was seen as idol worship. Those who sacrificed actually were killed by the sword. Those who just kissed it got a plague. And those who really wanted to be involved but weren't got this like disease. And then they died. Again, here the Gemara talks about more about the sin of the golden calf, that the Levites, right, Shevet Levi, did not serve the golden calf, right? When Moshe said, "Mi la Hashem Elai," whoever's for God, come to me. The Levites did come, and they did not worship the golden calf. Okay, here. We talked about making a ramp so that nobody can pull out the hairs of the goat. The question here says that the Alexandrians would pull out the hair. Here the Gemara calls them Bavlim, right, Babylonians, because they really did not like the Babylonians. Therefore they built this walkway so that nobody can touch the goat as it went out, right? And they said quickly, right, you have to go quickly because we want to get atonement. The next Mishnah at the bottom of 66 explains how the goat went out into the wilderness. That basically the people of Jerusalem would escort the ish iti, the man, and the goat to the first hut. And basically there were a total of 10 huts from Jerusalem till the place where they needed to go. And it was 12 mil, which is about, I looked it up, I think about 7.5 miles. That was the direction, that was the distance. And people could only walk from one hut to the other. And basically this takes us back to Masechet Shabbat. Those of you who learned Masechet Shabbat with me, we learned the concept of Tchum Shabbat, meaning that you can only go 2,000 amot outside of the city limits. That was about 1 mil, and therefore, or Roman mile, that's mil. And therefore, anybody who is going from one hut to the other could only go, every hut was 1 mil apart. And therefore, you could only go to you would escort him to the next hut. And then the last, again, so if you do the math, so every hut was 1 mil apart. There are 10 huts that would leave 2 at the end. So the people escorted him 1 mil, and then he walked by himself 1 mil into the wilderness. Okay, Daf 67 says that they would offer him food and drink, right, and water at each hut. Again, don't forget, it's Yom Kippur. he is fasting. And what's interesting is that when he got there, he really never ate. But the fact that he knew that he could eat helped him along. So that's interesting for those of us who fast. See if that would help you. When he got to the wilderness, hold on one second. Okay, you can see a picture of the wilderness. When he got to the wilderness, it's interesting. It's white here, but really it was red in the beginning. Okay, it's supposed to be red, right? Again, it's a red rope that's around his horns. The Mishnah tells us that he would split the red rope. It is going to hopefully turn white, but at this point, while the goat is still standing, it's not white, it's red. He would split it in half. Half he ties on the rock, which you can see here, and half he ties on the horns of the goat. And then he pushes it backwards, and it would, as you can see here, and it's nice that it shows you, it's not desert in the sense of sand dunes. It's if those of you who have visited Israel, this is the wilderness. It's very rocky. We're on a cliff. Sarah, we're going to talk about the huts in a minute on 67 and 68, but right now the Mishnah is telling us a little bit about it, and then we'll talk about our Mishnah talks about the huts that are 12 mil outside of Jerusalem. You're right that on 68 we're going to get a difference of opinion, so we'll see that in a minute. Here on 67, we're finishing up the Mishnah, that again, the goat would be pushed off of the cliff, and it would get torn apart as it rolls down the cliff. And then he would then go back, again, this man, the Ish Iti, would go back to the last hut. Again, he walks the 2 mil back, and he's weak and he's fasting. He waits till the end of Yom Kippur. His clothing becomes tameh and become impure. And now we're going to see a difference of opinion. Does it become impure when he leaves Jerusalem, meaning at the beginning of his journey, or only when he pushes the goat off of the cliff? Okay, so now on 67 at the Gemara, we're going to see differences of opinions, how many huts there were, and what the distance was. So again, our Mishnah said 10 huts, 12 mil. Another option is 9 huts in 10 mil, or maybe it was only 5 huts with 10 mil. And again, with an Eruv that lets you walk 2 mil instead of only 1 mil. Or maybe there are only 2 huts with 10 mil. And this gets complicated in terms of, again, our issue is, of course, the Eruv. We want to make sure that people can escort him, that he's escorted almost the whole way. And we know that the Eruv needs to be at a certain point. So again, the Gemara says that maybe people make an Eruv towards Jerusalem and the other make an Eruv towards the next hut. And then each one can walk 2 in each direction. Remember, we talked about when we learned in Eruvin, you can decide which way you want your Eruv to go, to the east or to the west. If you remember, one person cannot do both, but different people can do different ones. So here there's a scenario where from the same hut, some people make an Eruv to go basically towards Yerushalayim. Some people make an Eruv to go towards the next hut, and therefore you get more of a distance in each direction. Our Mishnah, again, as I mentioned, is like the first opinion, which is 10 huts, 12 mil, meaning everybody's just escorting to the next hut. As I mentioned by the Mishnah, but here it says it in the Gemara, that he never needed the food, but again, it was good to offer it to him so that he would feel better when he continued on his journey. Okay, so the question is that we said that he splits the rope half on the rock, half on the goat. And the question is why, right? Why doesn't it either all go on the goat or all go on the rock? Again, maybe he can't see the goat, so therefore you need it on the rock. And then again, the Gemara discusses how originally they would actually tie it in the temple, right? Not here on a rock, but in the temple. And then everybody could see if they received, one second. If everybody can just mute themselves.
It's in Spitz. It's so beautiful. Come sit outside a little bit.
If everybody can mute themselves, I'd appreciate it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thank you. And okay, so we're talking about the red rope that was tied on half on the goat and half on the rock. The Gemara on 67 describes that originally they would tie it in the temple, half in the temple, and the entire nation would wait to see if they received atonement. Meaning, again, this is a beautiful idea, right? When we're sitting on Yom Kippur in shul, we don't know if our prayers are answered. We hope they are. We send them, up. And we pray, but we don't get an answer necessarily. I mean, we do, but we don't always understand the answer. Here, the Gemara describes that originally they could actually see the answer to their prayers immediately. When the goat would get pushed off in the wilderness, that red rope would turn white. As you can see here in the picture, it's already white. They would see it turn white. But the issue was, right, what happens if it didn't turn white? Right, the Gemara describes that when the people didn't do proper tshuva, proper repentance, their prayers were not received, and it didn't turn white. So the Gemara describes how they would be so sad to see it not turn white, and therefore they decided to put it on the inside of the sanctuary. But then they decided, forget it. Let's put it out in the desert. Only the ish iti, the man who took the goat out, he could see if it turns white or not. The nation does not see it, which is very interesting. The Gemara now on 67 continues and describes if the limbs, again, we just mentioned the goat being pushed off the cliff, are the limbs permitted for benefit or not? Now, we would say, obviously, it shouldn't, because it's like a sacrifice and you shouldn't be able to use it. However, the Gemara says you're in the desert, and what happens if someone walks by and sees it? They don't know what these animal bones are. They don't know where it came from, and therefore we're concerned that people would get confused. So there's, of course, a machloket whether or not you can use these limbs or not. Again, the Gemara says that the entire temple service needed to be done in the temple and in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, right? As we know, the temple was or originally had a more temporary home. The Mishkan, it started off in the desert. It wandered in the desert with the Jewish people. When they came into Israel, it had different places. The most famous and the longest was in Shiloh. And the Gemara says that this service that we just mentioned was also done in the Mishkan as it was done in the temple. Okay. The Gemara continues again. We call it the seir, the goat that is le'azazel. And we kept using the word wilderness. The Gemara here discusses, where does the word azazel come from? Right? Az-el. It's harsh. It's rugged. And therefore, that's the place that it's going to. It needs to be steep. The Gemara says that it atones for things that are, again, uzah or azazel, arayot. It atones for things like illicit relations. Again, here the Gemara talks about the 3 capital sins plus theft. We understand that those are prohibited, right? We understand that those are immoral. What about chukim? Things we don't understand. This works very well. Yesterday we read Parshat Chukat, right? We read about Para Aduma. I hope all of you remembered a few weeks ago we discussed all the details of the service of the red heifer of the Para Aduma. So it was a good review when we got to it yesterday when we read it. But here the Torah talks about chukim, right? What is the value of having a commandment that we don't understand, right? It's very easy, says the Gemara, when something is immoral, at least in our eyes, we understand we shouldn't do it. But what about things we don't understand? Here the Gemara says not eating kosher, shatnez, right? Mixing two materials. Why, right? Why is this a commandment, right? We don't understand it. Again, and it goes through numerous commandments. And it says at the end of the verse, Ani Hashem, right? Because I am God. Right? My mother used to tell me things and I would say, why can't I do this? And my mother would say, because I said so. So that's basically what God is saying, right? Ani Hashem, I am God. I know what's best for you. And you need to understand that we don't always understand things. And I think that that's a very important lesson for us. Okay, let's go back. We're still on 67. Let's go back to the ish iti. Again, the man who's taking out, the person who's taking out the goat. He is called, again, the ish iti. We said that his clothing becomes impure, again, because he's part of this ritual. Again, we asked, when does it become impure? When he leaves Jerusalem or when he actually does the actual act of pushing it off the cliff. Again, as we mentioned, another opinion is that when he gets to the cliff, right? Again, leaving Jerusalem, getting to the cliff, or when he pushes the goat off. So, of course, that is a machloket and a three-way difference of opinion. Let's go to the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah, we're going to continue in our process. Again, so we're kind of split. The goat goes off to the wilderness. Now we come back to the temple. Again, we come back to the temple. The man did not come back to the temple, but we come back. The high priest goes back to the goat and the bull that were already slaughtered, and takes the parts that are going to be burnt, and he's going to burn the sacrificial parts, and the rest of them get strung up. You can see here, they get strung up, and those are taken out to be burnt. You can see here, other Kohanim are going to take the animal out to be burnt. Oh, you can even see, I just realized you can see like a sun. Here you can see it's like a bull's head and a goat head. I guess not if you're queasy, but it's different parts of the bull and the goat. Those are going to be taken out to be burnt, and the clothing of the people who take it out, they also become impure when, again, the same idea, when they leave the temple courtyard or when it actually gets burnt. So again, we're seeing different activities that are happening in different places. The Gemara says, again, that they take out the limbs to be burnt. It's going to be burnt later, and that the animal is kind of like braided together, and the skin is still on the flesh. Again, like the Gemara mentions, unlike a regular korban, a regular sacrifice, the olah, the sacrifice that is normally completely burnt, it is flayed first, and then it is burnt. Here, that was not the case. The skin is still on the animals, and it is like a different. It's like a different sacrifice that it is not slayed before it is cut up. Okay, we're now on 68. On 68, we say that we need to burn these parts outside of the camp. Again, as I've just mentioned, we're talking about two realities that are parallel. One is the Jews in the desert. The Jews in the desert had, as I mentioned, the tabernacle, the Mishkan in the center with, right, the camp was all around, right? Every tribe had its place around. And as the Gemara mentions, and the Torah mentions as well, there were different machanot, meaning camps, right? The machaneh, the camp of the Mishkan of the priests, the camp of the Leviim, of the Levites, right, again in the center, and the camp of Yisrael, of the Jews, of the Jews around. If something needed to be burnt outside, we need to understand what does that mean outside. It generally meant outside of the entire camp of Israel. The Gemara talks about outside the three camps, right? Kohanim, Leviim, Yisrael, outside of everything. Now, what's interesting is when we take that to Jerusalem, right? Again, we have the temple, which is the Kohanim, the camp of the Kohanim. We have what's called Har HaBayit, the Temple Mount. And then we have, which is the Leviim. And then we have Jerusalem, which is seen as the camp of Israel, right? Because the regular people lived in Jerusalem. And something that needed to be taken out of all three camps need to be taken out of Jerusalem. So that's our question, right? We're looking at the parallels between Jerusalem and the wilderness, right? The desert where the Jews were. So again, the Gemara says that it seems that it says in the Torah that it needs to be taken outside of the camp. The camp seems to imply one camp. The Gemara says, no, it needs to be burnt outside of all three camps. As you can see, the people here are walking out. It looks like, again, wilderness. It needs to be outside of Jerusalem. Again, their clothing becomes impure and needs to be burnt outside of the three camps. And the Gemara brings up different sacrifices that also need to be burnt outside. Again, in general, the sacrifice was burnt in the temple. There are certain exceptions. Those are sacrifices whose blood is applied inside the sanctuary. It's called a chatat pnimi. It goes inside the sanctuary. And therefore, those animals are generally burnt outside of Jerusalem. In general, a regular sin offering, as we mentioned previously, the blood in general is placed on the altar in the courtyard, and it's burnt on the altar as well, right, in the courtyard. So that's the difference between these sacrifices. Okay. So again, we bring up the para aduma, the red heifer, how it is also slaughtered outside of the temple to the east. And therefore, the Gemara says maybe we should burn the bull and the goat of Yom Kippur also to the east, or maybe it should go to the north, again, because it's slaughtered in the north, or maybe it should go to the Beit Hadeshen. This is where the ashes were already placed. And that is basically the answer. It's placed where the ashes, remember we talked about Trumat Hadeshen, where they removed the ashes from the altar. So that was placed outside, again, of the temple, and that is where they would burn these animals. Again, the one who burns it becomes impure, not anybody else who was involved. Right, again, if you stoke the coals, but not if you, let's say, touch the ashes, that would not make you impure. Okay, the next Mishnah, back to the Kohen Gadol. They told the Kohen Gadol that the goat that went out La'azazel to the wilderness had reached the cliff. How did they know, right? There's no cell phone. How do they know that it got there? Again, we know it's really far out. The Mishnah describes that there were watchmen who waved like flags or kerchiefs from one to the other. And that was the signal, and that's how they knew. This is reminiscent, I don't know if we've learned this together yet, but this is reminiscent of Rosh Chodesh. How did they know when it was Rosh Chodesh? They would light fires in Jerusalem and send it out. We'll see in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, they describe where each of the hilltops were and how the message got out to everyone. Interestingly enough, the message is now coming in the reverse order. It's coming out and into Jerusalem. So they got a signal. Or another opinion is that it was close enough so that they could walk back. People could walk back and tell them, and that's how they knew. Or again, as we mentioned, if the red rope was in the temple, they could see when it turned white, they would know that the goat was already pushed off of the cliff. Again, we said maybe the rope turned white maybe before it got pushed off, right? Maybe it only needed to get to the cliff. Maybe that, or maybe even at the beginning of the wilderness, it would already turn white. Again, machloket, we're not sure. And with that, we finish the 6th chapter of Masechet Yoma, and we're just going to keep going. The 7th chapter is going to finish off the temple service of Yom Kippur. The Mishnah describes the Kohen Gadol, now that he finished sacrificing, or at least being involved with the animals, he now goes to read from the Torah scroll. And the Mishnah describes that he could read in his white clothing or in his own clothing. And the attendant of the shul gives basically, which I don't know if everybody knows, but there was a shul, there was a shul on Har Habayit where the temple was. And there was a gabbai, there was an attendant who worked there and kept it up, which again is very interesting when we think about prayer and sacrifice and how those two things go together, and that there's prayer during sacrifice, which is interesting. 1 second, sorry. Okay. Okay, so let's keep going. So the attendant of the shul gives the Torah scroll, the Sefer Torah, to the main gabbai. He gives it to the assistant high priest, who gives it to the high priest, to the Kohen Gadol, right? So it's like a procession. They each give it to one another. Then they read from Achremot, which is the verses that talk about the temple service on Yom Kippur. Then he rolls it up and puts it in his chest. And then he tells him that there's much more written in this Torah scroll than I've read. And then he says the next section by heart. And then he says 8 blessings. The Mishnah says what these 8 blessings are. And then the Mishnah says that if you saw the high priest, then you couldn't see the goat and the bull get burnt, and vice versa. And it's not that you're not allowed to, but you couldn't because they were done simultaneously in 2 different areas. Okay, the Gemara says that, again, we're going to try to understand, is reading from the Torah scroll, is it seen as a temple service or not? Again, we see that he could wear his priestly garments, his bigdei kehuna, if he wanted to. That would imply it's a service, but it seems that he also doesn't have to. That would imply it's not a service. So what's going on here? So the Gemara says that maybe from this discussion, we can decide if a Kohen, a priest, is allowed to get personal benefit from his priestly garments, meaning are they seen as his, and therefore he can do whatever he wants with it, right? So a doctor can wear scrubs on Sunday when he's off, right? When he's on vacation, he can wear his scrubs. Or do you say, no, he needs to wear scrubs only in the hospital. They gave him scrubs to wear in the hospital, and that's it. When he leaves the hospital, he can't wear them anymore. The same idea, I mean, not to compare, but right, the same idea with the priestly garments. Are they seen as these are holy garments that you may not get personal benefit from, and therefore you can only wear them when you're doing a service, or not? And here the Gemara goes through numerous cases where we're at 69 now, right? Can you sleep on the garments? Can you use them in different ways that you get benefit from? And the Gemara basically says, no, right? You don't use them as a pillow. You put them next to you. And basically you can't prove one way or another at this point. And then there's a discussion, maybe they're shatnez, right? There's mixed wool and linen, and therefore, obviously, you can use them for temple service, but you cannot use them for whatever you want, because then you would be getting benefit from shatnez, from mixing these two materials, which we know that you can't. From here, the Gemara says, no, you can't learn it from that. What about learning from the fact that you're not allowed to go out of the temple wearing priestly garments, right? That shows that you can't get benefit. So here, the Gemara brings up, I think, a very famous story, but a very fascinating story about a day called Kaf. The date is the 25th of Tevet. It's called Yom Hagrizim. And this was some sort of a holiday that you weren't allowed to make eulogies on. And the question is, what was this holiday? And the Gemara on 69 describes that the Kutim, again, this was a nation of people, right? The Samaritans, maybe, who lived in Israel, who converted. We're not sure if they converted and how kosher the conversion was. But here is actually a story about the Kutim wanting to destroy the temple. And they have this plan that they're going to destroy the temple. And they sent a message to Alexander the Great that the Jews are terrible. We want to destroy the temple. Shimon HaTzadik dresses up in his priestly garments, and they all go, the Jews and the Kutim walk out to meet Alexander the Great, and they meet at sunrise, and Alexander, right, bows down to Shimon HaTzadik, right, to the priest, the high priest, and everyone is shocked. Why is he, right, again, Alexander the Great, why is he bowing down to this priest? And he says, right, every day, every time I go out to battle, I have this vision and I see this person in my dreams, and that gives me victory, right? And it seems that he has this dream. Maybe the idea, I mean, there's a lot more we can say about this. Maybe the idea is that God was helping him win or be victorious, right? He's really being led by God, but he definitely sees it as a sign. And he says, wow, this person has always brought me victory. These must be the people that I am going to give honor to. And he gives over the Kutim to the Jews. They drag them all the way to Har Grizim, which is their holy site. And then they destroy the area, just like the Jews wanted to, just like they wanted to destroy the Beit HaMikdash. And therefore that day became a holiday where we do not do sad things on that day, where we were saved from destruction. So the Gemara, why did we bring this up? The Gemara says we can see from here that you can go out of the temple in the priestly garments, because that's what he did. The Gemara says, no, you can't prove from here. It was what's called Hora'at Sha'ah. It was a unique day, a unique time that they needed to save themselves, and that's why they went out that's why he went out in the priestly garment, and we cannot prove from here if you can get benefit or not from the priestly garments. Again, we talk about the Sefer Torah, the Torah scroll that was passed from one to the other. It shows that you can give honor to a student even when the teacher is there, right? They gave it to the assistant high priest before they gave it to the high priest. Again, the Gemara says, well, it's really all in honor of the high priest. And then the Gemara discusses the idea that it says that God is great. Again, we talk about saying God's name in the temple and how the children of Israel cried out that Hashem, right, Hashem's name. Here it gets into another, like a very interesting story about Bnei Israel saying that they wanted they didn't want to have the desire to do idol worship. They asked God for permission to destroy the desire, the Yetzer Hara, the desire of idol worship. So they prayed and they fasted, and God sent down this desire of idol worship in the shape of a lion, and it roared, and then they trapped it. And right, God really answered them. And then they said, oh, wow, we did this, right? I think the ideas here, they're showing that nowadays we don't really have a desire for idol worship in the, I would say, in the original sense of the word. So therefore, this is one way to understand it, that it was trapped by the Jewish people. Another idea here is that they asked for the Yetzer Hara, the desire of sin in general, or maybe of relations. And God says, right, that's not smart, because if you do that, no one's going to want to have children, and the world is going to come to an end. And they saw that. They locked it up for 3 days, and it says nobody, there were no children, no eggs were hatched, right? Nobody, right, in the animal, in the human kingdom, nobody had children. So therefore, they let it go, but they blinded it. Again, I think this idea is, right, how do we understand the desires that people maybe had in the old days versus the desires that we have nowadays? So the Gemara explains, we don't have any desires for incest. And therefore, how do we explain it? We blinded the Yetzer Hara of sexual relations. That's why we don't have that desire anymore, but it's still around. So we have other desires. So I think just an interesting idea. I'm sure there's much more we can discuss it. But here, let's go to, let's go to Daf 70, today's Daf. Again, it talks about the fact that the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, skipped one chapter and went to the next idea. The Gemara says that's okay. In general, when we read a Torah, you have to go straight through. But for here, because it was, again, talking about things that have to do with Yom Kippur, it was okay to skip just a little part. The rest of the idea, he says by heart. And again, again, because we don't want him to waste time rolling the Torah scroll, and therefore the next part he says by heart. Again, he says these 8 blessings. Wait, hold on one second. Oh, yes. So he says the 8 blessings, some of the blessings that we say on the Torah, right? The blessings on the Torah, blessings that we say in our davening, in our tefillah, blessings about Yom Kippur, blessings for the nation. And then everybody brings a Sefer Torah, a Torah scroll from their home to, again, praise God in all the glory. The Gemara talks about not being able to see. Remember, we said if you want to see the high priest reading from the Torah, you can't see them burning the limbs because they were in a different place. The next Mishnah, and here we get towards really first of all, the end of the picture book. Wait, hold on one second. Okay. The next Mishnah is, we're getting towards the end of the day on Yom Kippur. So the Kohen Gadol is going to wash his hands. He takes off the white clothes. He goes into the mikvah. He comes out. He puts on his golden clothes. He washes. He goes out. He does his ayil, right? His ram, the ram of the Jewish people, and then the 7 lambs of the Musaf. That is going to be the afternoon. The additional sacrifice, the Musaf sacrifice, or maybe, and here the Gemara is going to discuss, the 7 lambs are brought with the Korban Tamid of the morning, right? Maybe they're done earlier. Again, the bull, right? The par of the Olah and the Sa'ir come with the afternoon. Then he washes his hands, goes to the mikvah, puts on his white clothing. Then he goes into, here's the picture, he goes into the Kodesh HaKodeshim, the inner sanctuary, to remove the machtak. Can you see in the picture? He's holding the shovel and the spoon. Remember, he put that in. He left it in the morning. It was a long time ago. So he goes in to take it out. He comes out. He washes again, goes to the mikvah, puts on his gold clothing. Then he's going to do. Here he puts on his regular clothing. It's called the gold clothing. He's going to do the ktoret of the afternoon. Again, anything done in his golden clothing are things that are done every single day. Putting the ktoret, the incense, in the afternoon is something that's done every day. Then he cleans the menorah. Right here's the menorah. He cleans it out. Then this is, by the way, the last picture in the book, 150 pictures. Then he goes to the mikvah again. He puts on his own clothes and they escort him to his house. And there he has a feast. And those of you who are familiar, at this point, we usually sing a song called Mar'eh Kohen. We sing it usually on Yom Kippur after we finish the avodah, that talks about when everything is done, they sing this song of relief, right? That the Kohen Gadol left he finished his avodah, his service. He was shalem, he was whole, he didn't die, and it's a great festival and a great joy when everyone sees him after the temple service. Here the Gemara talks again to finish up. There's a really a long machloket on Daf 70. Is the musaf, the additional sacrifices, are they brought with the morning or are they brought with the afternoon tamid? And that's basically the end of Daf 70. And with that, I'm going to say have a Shavua Tov. As I mentioned at the beginning, first of all, thank you everyone for joining on not the usual day. Next week, we're going back to our regular schedule. So not this Tuesday, because we did today, this week. So next Tuesday at our regular time, we will meet and we will finish off and we'll do, I guess, a week and a day. So it won't be too much, a week and 2 days of daf. We are finishing Masechet Yoma in 2.5 weeks. So get ready. Bezrat Hashem, we will do our siyum together. And wishing everybody a great week. And we'll see you soon. Have a good week,
Thank you,
everyone.
Thank you.